All right, there we go. So welcome everybody, and it's a pleasure to actually have you on this webinar on a very important topic, which is actually going to talk about enterprise business continuity. And what a time to actually have this topic, considering what we're actually going through right now in the global world. And today we have amazing list of speakers that are professionals in their different areas. And we have um, Yamu Cham, who is actually the product development senior of Freddie Mac. And also on my screen, we also have Mr. Darboe, who is also the president and CEO of SMD Policy Management Group. And also Lydia Nylander, who is also risk advisor for USAID. And what a better way to actually start our Amazon Web Services partnership with Africa. So the reason why it was taking quite a bit of time to log in is because they're the ones that are actually sponsoring any of the events that we're hosting from now against the rest of the year, which is trying to improve the Amazon brands in Africa. So we are actually honored to be one of those that are selected to actually push the Amazon brands. And you guys are the first actually to be the ones that launch the Amazon brand partnership, with Startup Guy and Banjul chapter. So it's really a honor to actually have you here. And I'm actually hoping that it will be an amazing session where we will delve into more about the topic concerned. So I'm good. For the last time, I'm just going to try to share the AWS video again so that we can just watch it and then we can just go through this session. Yeah. There we go. Oh, wow. Awesome. So I'm sure all of you have watched the AWS partnership and what they intend to do for Africa. So it's really an amazing partnership that we're actually looking forward to spread. We've already started actually deploying some of the credits for AWS, where they can support the local startups in Gambia and across Africa to use their AWS credits analytics. And well, we've had an amazing participant list actually at the moment that have joined us. So I'm just gonna delve right into the speakers that we have. I'm gonna start from Yamu, who's actually left on my screen to actually do an introduction about what you do. We've already received your bio, which is actually amazing, but we would also like to hear from you about who you are, what you do, what you've been working on for the past year or so. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right.
So Modou, thanks for having me, first of all. It's an honor to be here, and Lydia and Sana, I'm honored to be on this platform with you both, and hopefully we can stay connected after this. So as Modou mentioned, my name is Yamu Cham. I currently work at Freddie Mac as a product development senior, and part of my roles and responsibilities includes anywhere from risk management to project management, working with vendors on different system-related issues, and collaborating with our technology team as well. So far, I just returned to Freddie, actually. I was there for 5 years, and then left to a different organization and just returned. It's been about 2 months, but I absolutely love what I do, and I love the organization, and it's exciting. There's never a dull moment.
Wow, quite all right, so you move to Sana.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Njie. Welcome on board, co-panelists, presenters. Of course, currently live in Senegal, Dakar, but walk around Africa, mostly in Francophone and Anglophone countries. So working from the bio, I have 17 years public service experience, that is in the public sector, particularly in the Gambia. Before I moved international 15 years ago. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I mean, it's just flopping, but it's fine.
Sorry?
It was just flopping, but you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, yes. So I moved to Senegal and Canada, working in international, covering Western Central Africa in consulting. Consulting in the area of capacity building, institutional reforms, administrative reforms, and also training and building capacities of public sector officials, especially. So we do a lot of advisory and training, and particularly this subject area has become very important in terms of risk management and public finance reforms happening in Africa. So where lies the interest? So particularly excited to discuss this because, like Njie said, very timely, especially in the midst of this pandemic. We know that business continuity and all around that is not very, if you like, popular or high on the agenda, especially in the context of African countries, like we have in security management, like we have in environmental management. But I think with the pandemic and other, natural disasters, it has become quite relevant, both from the public sector, meaning ministries, departments, and agencies of government, and in the private sector businesses. So I'm excited to join all of you to discuss this particular subject.
Awesome. Thank you, Sana. Lydia, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Njie, for the time. Again, my name is Lydia Nylander, and I am a Chief Risk Officer at USAID, primarily focused on looking at a portfolio of risks across the agency related to our mission on sustainability and local ownership. So that looks at primarily 7 categories of risk: financial, programmatic, reputational, legal, security, information technology, and human capital. And we typically look, again, at the contextual nature of risk. And so what is happening with the global pandemic and COVID-19 and what that's doing to global supply chains and our ability to be effective in terms of the delivery of foreign assistance is obviously on the mind of everybody. And so I'm very looking forward to having a discussion about the interrelatedness of risk, the velocity, how fast risks develop, but also not to lose sight of the fact that risks can also be opportunities, and looking at ways that risk-aware businesses and enterprises are leaning into the opportunity to engage with their customer base and to make strategic pivots. So yeah, glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion. Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. And a great shout out to Baton Bari Lezo, joining from Port Harcourt, Rivers State, Nigeria. It's glad to see you here. And I'll just jump straight to the discussion. So obviously when you talk about enterprise business continuity, it's actually a term that has been here for a while, but quite a number of startups, especially small business owners that actually joining this webinar would want to know what exactly is enterprise business continuity. So I'm going to start with Yamu Cham. If you can actually give us an overview of your perspective about what exactly is business continuity, and the components that are actually involved in it, so that the listeners can really understand it.
Sure, absolutely. So business continuity is an organization's readiness or ability to resume operations in a timely manner after a disruption. And it's something that a lot of organizations, or I would say almost any organization, should take into consideration or implement the framework. Because as an organization, whether you're a young company or a more matured company, you do have legal and contractual obligations. And you want to make sure that you can meet those obligations despite a disruption. And there are various components of business continuity framework, and that includes the governance, there's the analysis, there's the testing and validation. You also have the crisis management component and the disaster recovery component. So governance component is essentially your oversight of the framework, and that includes your policies, procedures, management, reporting structures, and various risk management activities. And then the analysis component consists of the business impact analysis and the business continuity plan, otherwise known as the BIA and the BCP documents. So the BIA is an organization's, it provides the organization with a holistic view of its critical business processes. So, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. But yeah, the BIA provides the organization with a holistic view of its critical business processes, as well as the potential regulatory, financial, and operational impacts that those processes could have on the organization should there be a disruption. And you want to have that holistic view because it allows you as a company to prioritize and allocate your resources during a disruption. You don't want to wait until the disruption has happened and then you want to be reactive. So you want to be in a proactive state instead of a reactive state during a disruption. And the BCP actually builds on the business impact analysis document. So those critical business processes that were identified, you're now going to elaborate on those in the BCP document. So you need to have more instructions and more detailed information about those critical business processes that would allow your staff to operate efficiently during the disruption. So you should have a list of your vendors, systems associated with the process, your recovery team names, contact information, upstream and downstream dependencies, and as much details as possible to serve as a guide. So this is a document that I would say all businesses should have and provide their employees with, because you want to be able to have a copy of it, and that provides you again with the instructions to be able to operate efficiently. And coming to the testing and the validation component, this is where you then take your BCP document and test it to ensure that it will work as intended during a disruption. So you want to test it annually, but again, it depends on the organizations and the organization size as well as the resources available. But it is advised or best practice to have at least an annual test to make sure that these plans are in place and they're operating as intended. The crisis management component is essentially emergency response teams. And this is where you would have your tabletop discussions. So some companies can kind of bring in experts to walk them through this. So identify a process and have a tabletop discussion with all of the key stakeholders to ensure that, you know, you are responding accordingly during a disaster. And last, the disaster recovery, and I believe Sana is gonna speak more on this one, but disaster recovery is the more technical component where you can cut over to your backup recovery site, and that is more IT focused. So those are the key components, and just a high level overview of business continuity.
Wow, awesome. That's really insightful. So I'm gonna move straight to Sana and Lydia on this thing. When you talk about business continuity, it affects like everybody, but most so emerging businesses that are actually, you know, that have actually started even before the pandemic, and that are also currently, you know, on the same phase with, you know, where the pandemic is actually happening. So, Sana, from a governance perspective, like, what exactly could you tell us from your experience working with governments and, you know, private companies? Like, what exactly is the trend in terms of retrenching some of the services that are happening, especially for businesses, and what could we really continue? Because this is really important. I mean, I can have a coffee shop, for example, and, you know, and in the midst of the pandemic, I don't really know which activities I should continue doing or which I should really leave, you know, leave actually hanging. So it's really important that we have a perspective from your end on what has been some of the things that you've been able to see real organizations re-strategize on their continuity plans.
Yes, if I may just come in here, I think just to say that Yamu came with very, you know, some very important points. Maybe I will add one or two things before I just move into what you said. From what she brilliantly exposed, I can hear businesses to resume operations. Well, I want to emphasize the fact that what I have realized, the mistake most companies are making is not a document or a plan that you put in there as an instrument, and then after the disaster, you resume operations. I know that's not what she meant, but basically it's to ensure that you have the continued ability to do business. So during disruption, what are my plans? What are the plans? What are the alternatives that I have to continue operations? Now, to recover from disaster, we can resume operations, what we will call, for example, during this pandemic, be our new normal. That's also included in the plan. But the essence of the business continuity, taking up from where Yamu left, is to ensure that during any kind of disruption, major crisis, flood, you know, power outage, in Africa, for example, where you are currently, Mr. Njie, you know that you can go for a whole day or two without network. That's part of business continuity plan. That's how easy it should be. It's not just waiting for a pandemic. But if we have power outages, how does that affect my core business? And how is that going to play on my credibility and the loyalty of customers? So what are my alternative plans? So it should be institutionalized and be part of the business processes. I like the fact that she emphasized on proactive versus reactive. This is why we advise ministries and agencies we work with to conduct an annual review and a risk management exercise, you know, where they identify these threats and come up with a mitigation plan that they implement as they go on, you know, which is also part of the overall business continuity management process. She also talked a lot about the document. I mean, I like to emphasize on the process and the mindset than the document, because as we always say in planning, it's the process that is more important. Who is involved? What is the mindset of the people? Because, for example, certain disruptions or certain events, you don't even have access to your building. So this document should be ingrained in the brains of everybody. Brain, own it, and be part of the process. That's very important than keeping a document in a drawer. I mean, you brilliantly said it, but I wanted to add the fact that I emphasize a lot on involvement, training, and in the testing, where you also update this process. To come back to your question, Mr. Njie, this pandemic it will be a bit, if you put it in context, there are a lot of external factors that businesses will not control. So it will not be your normal business continuity planning processes because, for example, if I take a case of my business in the Gambia, there are government regulations we need to respect. If government says there's a state of public emergency, only core businesses or important services will be open, I have to close my business and look at alternatives like teleworking or home working. So I'm already affected by a pandemic, which is a global effect, like the first speaker just said about global supply chains being affected, global businesses, interconnectedness of businesses. So the pandemic is really, really typical, if you like. It's a very unique case scenario, which, for example, countries like the Gambia have not experienced, or Senegal have not experienced. We always go through the routine process of risk management, having business continuity plans, especially for global companies. But managing in this pandemic, from the morale, from the motivation, from the other regulations that are there, it's very difficult. So what I have seen, or what could happen, is that businesses focus on core businesses. What are your core businesses? Having done your impact assessment, looking at the areas that you cannot afford to leave, so that you continue minimal operations, to ensure that customer loyalty is there, getting them informed, getting everybody involved, especially it's being a pandemic that has affected almost every business or every individual. So from your impact assessment, you would have identified what are the areas that have more impact on your business, and how do I ensure that there are minimal activities on that to ensure that the credibility of my business, the loyalty of my customers, for example, is sustained. So, for example, a coffee shop in Gambia may not be affected on the scale of certain businesses that have to deal with individuals, or that have a lot of traveling, like my business. 80% of it's traveling consulting. So what do? You have to devise alternative strategies during this period and look at what can be done remotely. And I think Lydia mentioned that it's not only looking at it from the perspective of risk, but opportunities. So for businesses like training institutions, what I have seen, it has created the opportunity to create platforms, IT platform, delivering training and services online, and doing a lot of business conferences and meetings online. So developing their platforms on that as an alternative source of delivery, I considered it as an opportunity, and I have seen a lot of businesses developing those competencies around them. So exactly to answer your question, I think during this pandemic, we wanted to ensure that the business continues, but on essential services, because most of the issues are externally driven. WHO guidelines, social distancing, minimal services, government regulations, SOPs being declared. So we're a bit overwhelmed, and 80% of it is out of the control of businesses. So that's why you will see that there were relief packages for businesses, because it's not a normal thing that will happen. We can guard a lot against flood or storm or IT problems with our IT, but a global pandemic where your clients are affected, where your staff are affected, both health-wise and morale. This is why you've seen that governments have intervened to have relief packages, because there are restrictions and obligations and guidelines to follow. So that's what makes it a bit different. Maybe I'll stop.
Yeah, wow, awesome. So I'm just going to jump into, I'm just going to jump into Lydia now, because Lydia is actually a risk advisor for the USAID. And I'm sure you've been currently really, really busy during this pandemic in terms of doing a lot of risk assessment on some of the activities that you guys are involved in different countries. So what can you tell us about how can organizations really make up a very good risk assessment plan in the wake of uncertainties? And, as Sana has alluded, pandemics, floods, these are all part of, risk that could actually come up at any time. So what can you tell us about really, propelling a very, necessary risk, planning, in an organization?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So there has never been a more acute time for risk management as right now. We are never particularly the most popular people in organizational units. Oftentimes we have sort of that label as being naysayers, but our role is really to scenario plan. And so just to kind of go back and level set so that everybody sort of understands, there are different definitions of risk, but the one that really speaks to me is the impact of uncertainty on objectives. And so the reason that that particular definition resonates with me is because, again, it takes risk into a neutral place. Uncertainty can be both positive and negative, but it also puts your key objectives front and center. So again, understanding exactly what your strategic goals are and your objectives are is key in order to really have an effective risk management process, and one that you can monitor over the life of your business or your enterprise or your activity. And I think my esteemed panelists have reiterated the point that a risk management plan is not something that sits in a desk and develops dust. It is something that is a living, breathing approach to strategic planning, to implementation, and again, very key is monitoring. So a risk management plan will asks you to really look at analyzing risk and developing alternatives that really get to the root cause of that risk, whether that's an opportunity or a threat to your core objectives. And so the development of those alternatives can either in some or in part address root causes. Some of the big issues that I see are when people address risk and they haven't really understood what the root cause is, and they are addressing sort of a symptom of the risk as opposed to the risk in general. So you're like, okay, what does that really mean, Lydia? So in context with COVID-19, one of the things that we've seen as a sort of a global trend is the lack of ventilators, for example. We'll use that as an example. So what does that stem from? So there are a number of sort of root causes to that. One is that there globally appears to be sort of only 3 or 4 places or 3 or 4 centers around the world that are hubs for ventilator production. Another cause is the fact that many countries have downscaled or eliminated their manufacturing infrastructure to be able to quickly ramp up the production of these types of this type of technology. So together with a lack of, a breaking down of the global supply chain, a lack of internal manufacturing, and then a sort of a limit on the number of places where you're able to obtain these types of equipment, you're seeing the ripple effect of the interrelatedness of those risks together. And so risk management forces you to say, okay, it's not just about being able to secure contracts with, you know, leading ventilator suppliers. It's about looking at the contingencies that are required. So do I ramp up internal infrastructure in manufacturing now? What type of expertise and staff will I need for those types of exercises? You know, do I have access to the raw materials to do that? That's what risk management asks you to look at, and it asks you to ensure that the risk mitigation measures that you come up with actually will address those risks over time, because obviously we're working in a very dynamic, you know, situation with a global pandemic. So risk management is, I think, a key area and a key focus that businesses have to have in order to be able to not just secure core operations, as was mentioned by my fellow panelists, but also being able to adapt and pivot to the changing nature of operations. And so I think what you're going to see is the business community paying a lot more attention to risk management and specifically risk monitoring. I'm always of the adage that, you know, in God we trust, everyone else bring data. Data will tell you a lot about where your risks lie and whether your risk mitigation measures or your risk responses are really addressing those risks. And that's the information that enterprises and businesses need to be taking, you know, taking notice of. Thanks.
Okay, all right. I'm actually going to come back to you later on this if we have time. But Sana and Yamu, this is actually a very important question, because like most of the businesses are kind of like really having issues in terms of what sectors, and I don't think this was really highlighted a bit earlier, like what exactly as a small business owner do I really need to focus on, like when I'm really hit by uncertainties or situations that we are actually experiencing right now. We have a lot of people that are here, but some of them have to halt their operations, but they're a bit confused on what priority areas should I really focus on in a business. And these are really elements that are actually involved. So what can you guys tell us about, you know, in terms of operations, is there any kind of like a structured plan that an organization really needs to follow in order to survive situations that we are in at the moment?
Well, you want to go? What I have to say to that is not a lot really, because top of my head, you can't say that for business X, you focus on that. This is why the process that Lydia was talking about is important. It has to be institutionalized, and from the onset, businesses have to do a risk assessment. Go through certain events. When those events occur, because uncertainty is there, what are the impact on my business? Okay, so you have your risk profile and levels. And then what do I do? So it depends on really your plan and the process. For example, if you ask me, one of the businesses I run is consulting and training. In the pandemic, for example, during this pandemic, we know that social or physical distancing is a prerequisite, it's top of the list. So we can't gather more than 5, 10 people to train them. Our training size is 15 to 20. If you want to sell the training business, you have to meet clients, you have to discuss that. So that will be discontinued, given the context. So as part of our planning, the context of the pandemic, because it's a health crisis and it has to respect physical distancing, we cannot organize training. So what did we do? We looked at what during the pandemic we can do home working, not even coming to the office, the training team, because there is no point training will not happen. It's a government regulation. It doesn't even depend on us. Government has said no gathering, no travels, and most of our participants are coming from overseas. Airports are closed, so that business is automatically closed, given the context of the pandemic. What did we do? We refocused our resources to building alternative platforms of delivery, to focusing on the consulting businesses, which 80% of the time is offsite. So we've done a lot of work, for example, remotely with clients, meeting on Zoom, doing our SWOT analysis, doing our document reviews. And then we plan that immediately after, for example, there are 2 assignments, great assignments that we already worked on. And immediately after the pandemic, borders are open, airports are open, we can then go to the ground to do the validation workshop. So basically, I mean, you can't just say to this is what we focus on. The continuity plan that you have developed would say that if X, Y, and Z events occur, that's where Lydia's risk assessment is coming in. This is what we will do as an alternative. I mean, but you keep your business to the barest minimum, maybe get core team staff coming up to ensure that minimal activities of your business, because it's also to ensure that your business continues our core business, your core competencies, those that have greater impact. If you fail to do them during this period, it means that even come back to business will be very difficult. So those are the things you will identify, and this will depend on each business. So my advice would be, of course, to get into the process as a team, to develop your continuity plan and come up with these different scenarios. I think Lydia talks about scenario, because you have to have this scenario. If this is the case, what do we do, for example? My first experience with disaster recovery was 2002, 2003 in Crown Agent. I mean, we were taken to visit the site where if the headquarters is hit and down, tomorrow the business will start. Different site, information and databases there. But that was planning for a particular context, because in those days there was terrorism, there was 9/11 and all that. So businesses were planning to cover to different sites in case they were hit. But that is planning for a specific context and certain scenarios that are taking in place. So to respond to your question, I think what I will advise businesses is to have this risk management, risk assessment process institutionalized in their businesses, identify risk, look at different segments of their business and what could be the impact of some of these things on them, and then have a mitigation plan so that when that event occurs, they could at least have your alternatives to do.
Yeah, so just a follow-up for Yamu before you answer the question. There's also an issue of budget when you look at most of the reports that are actually coming out, because why would I actually spend a certain amount of money for my business to conduct a risk assessment? I feel this is really something you can touch on, because the budget is really very critical as well. If you can really share some thoughts about it, like how are you guys doing that? Because for a small business, I might not even have the capability to conduct a risk assessment, or a business continuity planning process. So what can you tell us from your experience about this? Yamu?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was a follow-up for Sana's comment. Yeah, I mean, I think all three of us are kind of speaking the same language here. And in terms of budget, yes, it may not be or may not have been a priority previously, but I would say those organizations who have allocated the budget to these risk management activities and developing their business continuity plans are probably the ones that are more successful under the current circumstances. So that should motivate any organization to make risk management efforts and a priority. And also just to, I guess, piggyback off of what Sana was saying in terms of preparing. So the business impact analysis is obviously prioritized based off of risk management and assessments such as what Lydia was referring to. So the impact analysis identifies, as Sana mentioned, the core processes. Those are otherwise known as the critical business processes. So I think we're using different verbiage, but speaking the same language. So those critical business processes, once identified, are the ones that organizations most of the time would focus on during a pandemic, such as right now. And as he also mentioned, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Different organizations would focus on different things. If it's a more technical organization, you're more on your technology. If it's something like a coffee shop, as you mentioned, you're going to have different priorities. So your focus may be making sure that you're following guidelines, operating at 50% capacity, for instance, and making sure that your customers are socially distant. So that's how you would succeed. And then a technology organization, right now, most of us are working remotely. We're working from home. So had they made business continuity a priority, I think right now everything is going smoothly in the organization. So budgeting is, I think now there might, if it wasn't a priority before, I think now it will definitely be a priority.
Oh, wow, awesome. So I'm gonna actually jump back to Lydia. You've actually mentioned earlier about some of the opportunities, obviously, and challenges that actually involves, you know, business continuity and also the risks that are involved as well. So maybe if you can just share some insights about, you know, the opportunities that we can look into as well, and, you know, some of the challenges, you know, that also businesses could actually be at the peril right now.
Sure, absolutely. This is the sort of the exciting part of what I do. Typically, my day is spent sort of telling people, giving people cautionary tales about moving forward, or asking them to kind of focus on what they're doing from a risk-aware posture. And I think what's nice about the opportunities that risk management can identify is, you know, are some of the pivots that I'm seeing currently happening related to the global pandemic. So specifically, that looks like, you know, many companies that are in the direct service or hospitality space are really, really struggling, right? So your whole business operation is based on a community or a congregation of people. So for example, the coffee shop analogy you used, that depends on people coming and the traffic of people coming back and forth to your premises. So what I'm seeing is businesses reaching out directly to their consumer base. So that's one thing. If you haven't been communicating directly with your customers and your supporters, that will be a key factor as to how you operate in this space. So having direct service, so, you know, whether you're actually selling coffee wholesale to people and they're able to then you know, have a coffee experience at home, whether you are pivoting and selling coffee directly to key essential businesses as a strategic pivot, if you are selling, you know, coffee to other manufacturers who are then sending, you know, doing sort of food delivery so that, you know, somebody gets their food with your coffee. I've seen those types of partnerships and collaborations work well. Another area that I've seen or I've heard about is there's been currently in a dearth in people sort of using cars or renting cars because people are not traveling on holiday and things like that. So rental car businesses are really struggling. And what I've seen is a strategic pivot so that these cars are available for food and other types of delivery services. So anything that you would have been, you know, going to a particular supplier for can now come to your house through these avenues. Another area that I've heard of that is sort of doing this strategic pivot are people who have been in the sort of Airbnb or hotel arena space where, you know, people are not traveling like they used to. They're not coming to hotels and things like that. And I've heard that the creative industry space of the film space have been able to use some of these homes, houses to create content, whether it's TV and other types of content on social media and YouTube channels. So people have been able to kind of pivot from using space for hotel and other types of convenient spaces to this arena. So you're starting to see strategic partnerships and collaborations develop. You're also starting to see people really developing personal connections and relationships with their customer base. My mentor and sage advice, Desiree Young, who has worked with the Tory Burch Foundation, the Tony Illuminou Foundation, she's always given me this adage, which is that nobody's coming, first of all. You have to figure out how to best position your company and your enterprise with what you have around you. Because there's no, there's no Superman coming from on high. This is up to you. But she's also really imparted in me and many of the companies that I interview through my podcast, Where's the Funding, is that we are in a position where profit and that relationship with your customer base is really going to get most of us through these tough times. And so what I've seen is CEO and founders of companies come from behind the veil and directly interact with their customer base. And those that have done that strategically are saying that business is better than ever. So I think it's really about establishing the context, your operating context, establishing and understanding what your strategic objectives are, understanding what's required for key operations, and developing the types of responses and strategies and alternatives that is going to get you through sort of the continuity phase onto maybe growing and scaling. And so it's going to take the types of skills that entrepreneurs need to either stay in business and be successful. So, many of the skills are transferable. But, I've been amazed. I've been amazed by how many people have kind of, built an outdoor space. If they didn't have, one and they were an internal operation, people are figuring it out. So, yeah, I've been really impressed by people's kind of perseverance and their dexterity.
Oh, wow, quite a lot of strategies that people are using. So, Sana, so what exactly would be the best position for any entrepreneur right now or a startup to be in at the moment? Whether you're thinking of pivoting yourself, like really succeeding at the moment, and also post-COVID-19, because it's not going right now. And the best time for business continuity is now. So what would be the best fit for any entrepreneur to think of at the moment? Like, what should I do right now? What should I really focus on that can really get me out there? Because we don't really also want to lose, especially in the case of Gambia, where I'm from. A lot of the startups are actually selling their machines just to survive. You can't blame them, for example. And you also have a quite number of them that actually join. Some of them really have no idea on what to do. And it's really sad. So, and we really want to help them. More of the reason why we even try to bring this, the perspective of the continuity plan, because, it is an epitome of where they can actually hold as a blueprint for what they can look into to map out an organizational success metrics for them. So what is the best position and a fit for any startup or entrepreneur to really look at the moment?
Yes, before I come to that, you mentioned the issue about cost. And I think Yamu did justice to that. But I wanted to add that when I said institutionalize, that's exactly what I meant. I don't mean that people should see developing business continuity plans and processes as an event. I think it should be part of the business. We should have, I don't need a consultant like Sana or Lydia to come and develop that for me. Yes, if they can help. But if we can build capacities around our quarterly meetings to do a simple risk assessment, because it depends on the magnitude and the impact that you'll have on business. So small businesses you're talking about don't really need that very elaborate plan. I mean, for me, I'm not a fan of all these. What you should do is be part of your work plan. Because if you come up with, Lydia will tell you, if you do a risk assessment, you evaluate 2 dimensions, you know, the impact of the risk and the probability of the risk and all that. Then you have your, you know, different risks and, you know, your different levels. What you do now, you come up with a plan, a mitigation plan. And that's why I wanted to come about and talk about cost-benefit analysis when Lydia was talking about ventilators. One thing we should also keep in mind, which risk experts will tell you, I mean, the mitigation, what you plan to do, the actions you take must be commensurate with the impact of the event. So we don't go and create an infrastructure that is so elaborate as an alternative if it doesn't commensurate with the impact it's going to have on our business. So for small businesses, what I'm thinking, they should have the culture. They should institutionalize this process and have risk meetings and have people that are responsible to implement that and have that as part of their work plans. If I say institutionalized, meaning that that mitigation plan, some of those actions are directed at departments and directorates that will implement that. So it becomes part of your business processes. Then it becomes institutionalized. Then the issue of cost, how much do I spend to develop that, will not come into play. Of course, bigger institutions, you will say that it's expensive now, but if you see what happened during the financial crisis, the credit crunch, this is why you see even in Africa, banks have directors for risk, because there was so much risk, there was so much impact on businesses. You know, you will all remember the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Article 44 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act after Enron crisis. You know, all those issues related to risk and how do we really, in terms of our corporate governance, internal controls, you know, strengthen those things, because risk comes with control. This is why you make sure that, you know, you ensure that you minimize or mitigate against its occurrence. So the issue of cost may not really come into play for small businesses. They just have to have the culture and have these things as a business operations. Sometimes it's very subconscious. Like I told you, you go to many businesses in Gambia, they have standby generators. For me, that's a plan, that's a mitigation plan, so that my business continues if there is now a failure. In some other countries, you will not have it. When I opened the business in Gambia, I had to transport my generator from here because for the last 3 years, I haven't had a blackout. So it depends on the context and what alternatives you need to take. I mean, your first earlier question about what should a particular business do, like we were saying, context, and I think Lydia really responded to that. For example, your coffee shop, as part of your business continuity planning or your risk management, you could have identified an event where people don't have access to your coffee shop, which is one of the cases is the pandemic, where people are asked to stay home, so they are not coming. What would have been your part of your plan? Alternative would be to have alternative supply mechanisms, and that's where the importance of delivering at home. That's where the importance of keeping loyal customers and keeping a customer database would have been part of your plan, so that the people that come there, for example, whenever I'm in Gambia, I go to that shop where we had coffee. I mean, if they really are serious entrepreneurs, part of business, they would have identified 1 or 2 of us and keep us in their database in case we leave around the environment. So in cases like that, you contact your stakeholders, your customers, your employees, and tell them that we have alternative delivery so that your business operations can come up, and then you have loyalty, and then your branding continues. So this is why I was saying it has to be specific to the business, and it has to come up during your risk assessment or your continuity planning processes. How do we, based on scenario A, based on event A, event B, or event C, how do we go about it? Now you touched on a very important point, and this is what I was trying to explain about the startups. The pandemic has hit, and it has hit very hard. If you have just started a business in the Gambia, you're just 1 year or less than 1 year, you're saying they've started to sell. This is where the responsibility of our governments come into play. I mean, the scale of the pandemic and its impact on businesses couldn't have been really assessed in some cases, in some countries, even by major experts like Yamu or Lydia. You wouldn't have done that. And what happened? This is why you saw that institutions like World Bank and ADB had to give colossal sums to our governments. They have to give them debt relief. They have to reschedule the payment of their debts and loans because they were not very prepared for that. In the same vein, they were supported. I think this is where the responsibility of our governments come in to support businesses. In Senegal, for example, millions of dollars were allocated for small business loans. Very interesting, almost debt-free with a repayment period of 10, 15 years, for example. That's almost like giving you money because it's a pandemic and 99% of your SMEs would not have planned for that.
Yeah.
Unemployment in the main and contribution to your GDP is created by these SMEs. So it has an impact on the economy. And this is why the solution is not entirely these startups or SMEs. It's for government to play with the private sector, the partnership, and to see what relief packages they will come up with. I've spoken to many senior officers at the Ministries of Finance and Trade in many countries, and they have come up with relief packages.
Yeah.
You've seen that the Gambia's supplementary budget has an interesting package for the hospitality industry, which were hard hit. I think Lydia was talking about that, the hotel industry. What they could have done, the minimum they could have done is to partner with government and use their hotel facilities as quarantine centers, like I've seen in Niger, you know, and in other countries and in Gambia, so that they can maintain their operations. But that also has a negative side in terms of using your hotel as a quarantine center, in terms of the image it leaves there. So essentially, even though, I mean, if you're in business as an entrepreneur, you would have planned for these events, you would have been, but as entrepreneurs in Africa, already coupled with the problem of access to finance and solidify their base, I think this has hard hit, and it mainly is for our governments to intervene and support most of them, because not only will they experience redundancies, because if you talk about core businesses, you know, they're going to keep their core employees. And for how long would they keep everybody on their payroll? So you have to have leave without pay. You have to have people on off. And this is why the government should intervene, so that businesses will resume to their new normal after the pandemic, because it's not very easy. But some of the things that you can do, which are within your control, for example, will be in the first instance. That's why I like the balanced scorecard method of doing the business continuity planning in terms of strategically planning it, looking at the 4 dimensions. So in the finance dimension, like Yamu was talking about, you already have obligations. The first thing to do is to go to your banks. And this is why governments came in. Most governments have engaged financial institutions, including the central bank, so that banks could look at and review their debt policies and look at debt repayment by businesses. For example, I successfully negotiated, you know, with my financiers to see how we can reschedule this, because we already know the context. So you must be, that's the proactive part of it. You must look at all those things. If you have long-term rents, for example, or lease, how can I negotiate this within the context of COVID-19, so that, because cash flows will be affected, my inflows are affected. So I need to only have outflows for essential services and keep some businesses. That's some of the things the CEOs can do to really look at, you know, the impacts on some of these things, the revenue flows that are coming in, and how do I renegotiate most of my obligations in terms of the finances, keep my core team here, and also see what support, if you are a small business really starting up, what support we could get from other partners.
Oh, wow, this is really awesome. I'm actually thinking.
The part also is important. The communication part is very important. And I think that's already in your business continuity plan. You must keep all stakeholders informed at every level in a very transparent manner. From your staff, because in your continuity planning, you would have got alternative means of communication, other platforms apart from the regular emails. You must continuously keep them informed, even though most of the issues are out of your control during a pandemic. But during this crisis situation, communication is very important. It brings about confidence and loyalty to your customers. How you can just ensure that you keep your customers informed. This morning, I opened my email. I saw one from EcoBank, just a big message saying that, masks are obligatory when you are coming to the bank, make sure you are, because that is a government policy out in Gambia where you have to wear a mask. Those kind of communication, customer loyalty from the CEOs and management or the business continuity teams is very, very important to communicate during this crisis. Keep everybody at the same level of information. People are aware and you keep them going so that as soon as operations resume, everybody is motivated and excited to come back to business as usual. Yeah.
Wow, awesome. I actually don't even want this conversation to end because I've learned a lot about business continuity from the three experts that we have here, but this would be a blueprint. We took up the responsibility, feel like this was actually missing in the ecosystem to really help businesses because I've been watching and I haven't really seen quite a lot being done to help businesses have a plan like this. So I'm sure, and it's recorded, so obviously a lot of businesses will have the opportunity to watch it again and probably make reference points to all the recommendations that you have made in regards to the perfect planning that they can have for their business. So we've definitely run out of time. I think we're at 6:15 currently, which means that the conversation was really amazing. So I would like to thank all of you. But just before we go, just a quick word on what does the future of business looks like. I feel really good hearing it from the experts telling me that, hey, this is where we're going to be, looking at the situation. I'm worried because most of the travel plans are really not working out. We're supposed to be in Kenya, but we couldn't go. Everything is disrupted and a lot of businesses are really, having issues. So just a quick one from all of you before we wrapped up on what exactly do you think is the future of businesses right now, in light of what our realities are at the moment. So maybe Lydia, you're actually on my right-hand side.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to go first.
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely going to be either national or regional ramping up of internal infrastructure and manufacture too. So Sana made the very, very important point that, these alternatives will develop, and based on cost and based on the impact that they will have on sort of the greater objective or the greater initiative. And I think that was a very salient point. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the impact that additional issues around health and security, what that's going to have for nations, mm-hmm. I do think that there's going to be sort of an internal investment in that. Mm-hmm. So that's one area that I think will increase. Mm-hmm. I am seeing sort of positive developments in, again, global, trying to shore up global supply chains. Yeah. I do see that being sort of an area where people are focused. Mm-hmm. And then I would definitely say the area of that supports continuity of operation. So I currently live in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. Things like childcare, alternative learning platforms, with schooling now looking like it will be some virtual, other alternatives around supporting the family and supporting people's ability to not just work, but live and create and do things at home. So I think that any business that kind of focuses on that type of function, again, I think Sana made some amazing points around communication, direct communication, telling people the good, the bad, and the ugly about what business continuity is looking like. The genuine nature of that communication, I think, is key. So those are some of the areas that I see sort of like percolating up. Food delivery, again, cannot stress that. People are really enjoying somebody else cooking for them. And some of these things that are just allow for the support and the continued thriving of family. That's what I'm seeing as key areas.
Awesome.
I'll let the rest of my colleagues
Thanks.
chime in.
So I'm getting Sana in the middle, so maybe you can just share.
Yeah, I think you said it all, but I will emphasize again, I mean, it's a pandemic. I think I am convinced that partners and governments have understood what businesses are going through, and a lot of goodwill and support is coming on. But this is also a lesson for most of our businesses to understand that some of these processes and frameworks must be institutionalized and be part of our business processes, if you like. The businesses that will survive really are businesses that I will call resilient. ILO has a framework, you know, the steps to do for SMEs to do a business continuity plan. And I like that. I'll share it with you to give it to some of your participants, because it's taking step by step, and it's taking a small business in Kenya, how the lady that is into canned sardine is able to have a business continuity plan following those steps and what she's doing. That's very important, and resilience is important. And that's why risk assessment is important. Currently, or if they have not done it, you know, there are many scenarios. They have it, they're now implementing. If they don't have it, they should start thinking about it. What are my plans to continue operations, you know, during this period or thereafter? Because nobody knows when this will end. And that is why everybody have agreed that we need to, you know, live with this virus until we have a vaccine. So what do we need to do? You need to start your self or reality check, your self-assessment. So there are a lot of self-assessment templates where you look at your, for example, the ILO one that I'm talking about is looking at the 4 Ps, people's, processes, partnerships, etc., to look at your risk profile. And from there, you should be able to say, well, if I score 0 to 20, then I am resilient. So you should understand that you should be able to continue. Your processes are in place. You have alternative sources. You have fallback positions. So you should be able to continue easily into this new normal. But if you do that self-assessment and you find out that you're scoring, for example, out of 60, you're scoring 40, it means that your business is highly vulnerable and you should be scared. Yeah. And this is why you need to strengthen some of those control mechanisms, some of the processes that are lacking along these 4 Ps, for example. So frameworks exist. What I would advise businesses is to start rethinking, do a self-assessment, and see whether they need to stay in business, they can continue business in the new normal, and if not, what needs to be done urgently to reduce that vulnerability, for example. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, again, it's a pandemic, it's a global health crisis, which has even touched economies. GDP is going down by 2-3 percentage points. So that's really what you will normally call in your normal contracting force majeure, you know, almost force majeure, which risk experts cannot really plan for some of those things. You know, we can look at alternatives like flood, losing my data, having terrorist attack, no access to my building. All those scenarios, we can really think about them if we are very proactive. But I have never thought that a global pandemic like this will touch all business. Of course, with globalization and interconnected of businesses, we should expect something like this. I think it's a good lesson for all of us, and it emphasizes the fact that risk management processes should be at the core of our businesses, as important as our environmental management processes or our security management processes. And like Lydia said, I think they're the most important people in our organization these days.
Wow.
Yeah?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sana. And Yamu, you can just give us your final comments.
Well, I'm not sure I can add much on top of what Lydia and Sana already have elaborated. But essentially, I think organizations or entrepreneurs should be, or will probably be looking into being more creative in their operations. And also collaboration is, as Lydia, I think, mentioned, is an opportunity. So you may have one type of business and you have maybe a next door neighbor who's also running a business, and you can find ways to collaborate. So that's a new opportunity. And also I think the strengthening of technological infrastructure is definitely going to be something that is going to be kind of coming to the forefront. So if it's something that maybe didn't affect your business before, but it's something that you can leverage, as Lydia gave the example of delivery. So perhaps you're just a small business and you're selling food or something like that, but through technology, you can now deliver to people in their homes. And also, lastly, as Sana mentioned, is the support of our government. I think that's something that hopefully will increase for our entrepreneurs, because it's definitely a necessity. And, you know, businesses getting some financial support from the government is something that it's a given, at least from my perspective, and it's not something that should be an issue. I think the government owes it to our communities and to all of these entrepreneurs to provide them with the support needed in order to strengthen our strengthen the economy. So that's just my thought on it.
Thank you so much, Yamu. It's been a brilliant session having all of you. And this is, as Baton Barry has alluded, this session is very informative. It qualifies for a masterclass session. Okay, I will talk to the speakers to see on business continuity, plan using risk management. And obviously, Lydia has also written her comments on great to be on. Would love to have another session on this. Obviously, we're looking forward to it. You know, we have a lot of events that are coming up shortly. So it's definitely a pleasure. So I'm just going to wrap up with the AWS video just before you, just before we say bye.
I was.
Yeah. Okay. Go on. Go on, Sana.
No, I was going to say it's a good suggestion, and it could be very technical. And maybe next time around with presentations in specific areas as to how they can go about it, and concrete examples would help with what the comment you have from Baton Barry, for example.
Okay.
I think it could be done, yeah.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
It would also be great if we could, you know, people could bring their specific questions, because I know risk management is an area with lots of lexicons and terminology, but it really is, I mean, people are doing risk management every day. We're navigating risks in our day-to-day lives all the time. So happy to be on another call and demystify some of this for people if that's appropriate.
Okay,
thanks
awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. So just before we go, let me just share the AWS video, and then yeah, we'll wrap up.
Is it without sound? The first time I didn't get any sound.
Can you hear it now?
No.
Oh. Strange.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Wow.
But it's okay, yeah. Baton Barry is also saying no sound, yeah.
Okay, I think AWS will be happy that we've done justice for them sponsoring the event. So, you know, we just helping them in the outreach in terms of part of their brand awareness in reaching really Africa. And I think it's really important that we have you guys to actually share the insights, you know, starting the AWS Africa partnership that we have, and, you know, also as a blueprint for really, you know, a very good enterprise business continuing model. So thank you so much. And I'm going to leave it at here and see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thank you.